Hi, I'm Chanelle. Regulating the use of drugs on the Isle of Man would help take away the power from criminals. That's according to two groups who are calling for the introduction of a safer system for those who use substances. This week, a meeting was held by Anyone's Child Families for Safer Drug Control, as well as a member from Transform Drug Policy Foundation. I attended the meeting and spoke to both representatives as well as some members of the public that attended.
Hi, I'm Jane Slater. I'm Deputy Chief Executive at Transform Drug Policy Foundation.
And I'm Ray Lakeman. I'm a member of Anyone's Child, which is a branch of Transform.
Right now, today we had a meeting discussing drugs in the community, the impact that it has, and some of the possible solutions of how we can help the community or help the Isle of Man. Could you tell me about it?
Yeah, today was a culmination of a number of meetings that we've held on the island, and this was a bit of a public conversation, as you say, both looking at how drug policy is not working on the Isle of Man and where it is failing our communities and not keeping our young people safe, but also looking at what can be done about it. So we were looking both at innovations that could be done tomorrow. So there are no legal hurdles to innovating in these ways, and looking in depth at what some of those could be, but also looking in the longer term at what a vision of a controlled and regulated drugs market could look like, which is really what we think would better protect our communities.
And I'm involved with this because of my own children's involvement in the use of drugs and how it's impacted on my own family. I think as a direct result of failed drug policies. The policies have failed to protect my sons. It's continuing to fail to protect other families. We're seeing more and more young people getting involved with drugs. And these are people that the current policies are not protecting. So we need to look at new ways to look after our. And I think that one of the ways that we can do this is by reforming the drug laws that exist at the moment, taking the power away from organised criminals, and hopefully making a better future for our children, our families and communities.
Now, Ray, you said some very powerful stuff earlier where you said, you never taught your sons, or you taught them against the dangers of drugs. They went to school. The school also taught them against the dangers of it. But unfortunately, these things happen. And then you also, you also said that you're not coming out and advocating for drugs to be legalized, but you want it to be done in a safer way and take away the power from the criminals.
Yeah, I think that there's a big misunderstanding about what I'm saying and what I'm asking for. I think if our current drug laws worked and it was preventing the kind of accident that happened to my sons, if they worked, then I think that would be perfect. We'd be living in a perfect world. If you could stop people from taking drugs, if you could educate them, and talk them out of it and tell them about the dangers, if that actually worked. If the deterrent of taking illegal drugs actually worked as a deterrent, if you could actually stop people from selling the drugs to them, which are the current policies, if you could actually do that and they worked, then we'd be living in a wonderful world. But unfortunately, we live in a world where people want to take drugs, where there is a market for them, and that market at the moment is run by criminals who are making the situation worse, and it's our laws that are allowing this to flourish. And if we want change, we have to change the laws, because if we carry on doing what we've been doing for the last 50 years, we're going to see a continuation of this, and in fact situations worse than every ongoing year. More and more people are getting dragged into this. Our communities are being affected more and more, and we still continue doing the same things. So I think it's time for change.
Now, you also met with members of Tinworld earlier today. How was the feedback from that meeting?
Well, I think it was a positive meeting, but I guess it awaits to be seen. We know that there is a report coming out from Liverpool John Moores University, which they are waiting for a debate in Tinworld. But we like to think that there is an appetite for a discussion around what innovations can happen on the island.
Yeah, based on the findings of the John Moores, which is something that the Tynwald itself has commissioned. It's taken us some time for this report to come out. It should be very, very detailed. At the moment, we don't know what is in the contents, what ideas it has come up with, what they're actually going to suggest to Tynwald. We don't need to wait for that, but it will. It should be public information very soon. The public will know what's in these documents. They'll have an opportunity to read it and find out about it, and then Tim will discuss it, and then maybe there'll be a better opportunity for have another meeting like tonight, where people are more informed about what is going on, and what the options are for Tynwald and how they think they can proceed in these issues. Very important issues.
Will the decriminalisation, will it help to reduce the number of users that we have on the island? Well, if it's done the medical way, the way that you're suggesting.
So we're calling for the legal control and regulation of the drug market. And to me, it's about drug harms rather than use per se. So what we're really interested in is how to minimise the harms of the market and of use, rather than looking at numbers of users. Different countries have different patterns of use depending on their drug policy. I think really looking at numbers of users is the wrong indicator. We need to be looking at levels of harm.
And would it help also get rid of decrease the criminal element?
Well, that's something we're really interested in. I think it is only when you regulate the market that you can take the power of the drugs market away from the criminal, organised criminal gangs, and hand it over instead to pharmacies, doctors and licensed retailers who are much more responsible for the output of these products.
Yeah, I think the fact that my boys were able to get their hands on drugs that were unregulated, had it been a regulation dose and people know that their regulation dose exists, they would still be with us now. I'd much rather they didn't take drugs, but if they were going to take drugs and they did take drugs, regardless of what I wanted, regardless what the public large seemed to suggest, and the government's one, there are people who will take drugs. We should be looking after them. We need to regulate. If they had had a regulated dose, they wouldn't be dead. They would be here with us now. And it's the same for loads of families. The people getting dragged into drug culture and criminalisation because of the existing laws.
Ray, earlier you spoke about at the inquest when you found out that there could have been a regulated way for your sons, and you also spoke about just after their cremation or when they were cremated, their friends came out and said they're going to continue, but they're looking for a safer way to do it. And you said that you were surprised by these things because you didn't know it could be regulated then. When you found out, what went through your mind, and is that why you're now advocating for it?
Yeah, very much so. I mean, I don't want any family to end up in the same situation that we're in. We never expected to be here. We didn't know that necessarily that my boys were taking drugs. The first time when we really knew that Torin was taking drugs was when the police turned up and found out he was dead. And up to that moment, we thought that what we'd been saying, what they'd been taught, was sufficient. I now know that that wasn't sufficient. I don't know what to say about what else to do. I don't want other families to be in this situation. Every time I hear about somebody, whether they're dying, whether they're being criminalised for drug use, when I know that these young people, it can be taken safely. I don't like that idea, but it can be. They're taking it, but if it can be taken safely, I would rather that. And I know that young people, that is what they want. They're going to keep on taking drugs, whether I like it or not, whether governments like it or not. People might not like hearing that, but that is the truth, and we should address the truth and act accordingly.
Earlier, you heard from one member of the public who spoke about what's happening in the community at the moment. She spoke about young children being vulnerable, young children being exploited. We had the Ofsted report that was released today, and in the Ofsted report, a child had admitted to having sex, selling sex for money just so they could buy drugs. When you hear things like that, what goes through your mind?
I think it's extremely sad that the drug policies based on prohibition that we have are pushing increasingly young and very vulnerable young people into the drugs market. And I think that's why both Ray and I campaign. I think that is avoidable. We want to employ all sorts of forms of regulation to help keep our young people safe and better protect them. And as we've argued, this can only really be done when you regulate the market. Let's get poor, vulnerable young children out of this market because they shouldn't be there. It's not a great place, but the potential is there, and I think what I'm buoyed with by this trip to the Isle of Man is I think there is an appetite for a discussion about how it could be done better, and let's have that conversation and think about what policies could work for people living here.
Ray, would you like to add anything there?
Yeah, I mean, it's a very, very sad case, but it won't be a unique case. And I think these things are arising as a direct result of current policies, which puts the control of the drugs market, which exists and is going to continue to exist, in the hands of criminals. And anything that we can do can take that away. Is the right policies is the direction we should be taking.
Last question. What's y'all's message to the naysayers, the people that read about this and say, oh, we shouldn't be even looking or talking about something like this?
Well, I think we've had 50 years of our current UK drug policies. Let's review it, evaluate it, and look at the evidence of what works. What is clear, looking across the world, is we have record drug deaths, record levels of use. The dangers around the market are increasing. We have children now involved in the market, as you've identified. Surely the time is for that conversation and for us to learn from some of these mistakes and look at what a more positive policy could look like.
I think people need to ask themselves, are they happy with what's going on? Are they happy with these messages? Are they happy with these stories of vulnerable people being dragged into drugs, criminality and things like that? If they're happy with it, then we should continue with the policies that we got. I think most people would say that's wrong if they really think about what's going on.
It was useful to have a discussion in advance of information being presented to Tynwald in a couple of months' time. Shame more people didn't turn up, as usual. A lot of people have their own opinions about drug use on the island, and this was an opportunity for them to come and take part. So it's always a bit of a disappointment when people don't take that opportunity, but there we are. I think the whole issue of drugs policy is one that is needing a lot of thought on the island. We've just had a report from Ofsted today about the situation with the care system on the island and the failings there, and they all tie into drug use and drug misuse and young people being caught up in criminal activity when I think there are other ways of doing it.
Right. So Dawn, you attended the meeting today. What did you make of it?
I'm delighted that Jane came from the Transform Drug Policy Foundation, because I think it's time that we took a fresh view on drug policy. I think it's very clear that since the policy, the war on drugs policy, it hasn't worked. We are exposing the health of our children. We're exposing them to danger. We've got organised crime on the island, organised gangs. It's a growing problem. It's a growing problem with violence. I stand here not just as an MLC, but as a parent. I have 4 children. I've seen the risks presented to my children. So I think it's refreshing to see this. It's good that Transform deliver policies on how to legalise and different models that work for different jurisdictions. So I think there's good conversations ahead to be had.
So, Peter, you came out to the meeting today. What made you come out to it, and what were your thoughts on it?
It's appalling that there's only one MLC here for this public meeting. Drugs is in crisis on this island. It has been when I first raised it, where 40 years ago it was a problem. Today it's even worse. We need a responsible, mature debate on this issue, and I hope the organisers of this meeting will come up with an alternative, well thought out policy decision on it, instead of the cheap way of politicians wanting to pander to prejudice. We're putting people who need social services intervention into £62,000 plus a year in a prison. There are ways of dealing with this issue. We tried, in 1981, we wanted to legalise cannabis. They proved to me that the psychosis issue was a big problem with young people under 30. Now the point is today is now the skunk and other more highly addictive stuff that's causing an awful lot of trouble for society and for the next generation. We need a mature thing, and we need to get the politicians away from dog dirt and potholes and actually start developing the strategy to make this island a better place.
Do you think some of the suggestions that were mentioned today is a way forward?
Yes, of course there are things. I mean, this idea of putting everything in the criminal justice system is crazy. It's ineffective. It's very expensive, and all it does is play to the ignorance of people who have no problem with the blight of drugs in their family or their friends.
So, Amanda, what did you make of the meeting today?
I think it's a great tragedy that there weren't more people present, because I think it's an issue that impacts far more families than they think it do, and I think an awful lot of people are in denial and believe that their children are not involved, and even if they're not directly involved, they're on the periphery, and there is always the temptation. And as long as we have a war on drugs that's been lost and no acceptance that we need to make changes and we need to be proactive and we need to be protecting our children, then I just think it's very, very sad that we didn't have more people here tonight, because I do think it's something that impacts a very large percentage of our adult population, and both parents and grandparents who should be here hearing the reality of what our children, the pressures that they're under, the things that they face. We're very aware of the mental health crisis, and I think the mental health crisis with young people is very much linked in with the issue of drug usage on the island as well.
Now, speaking of the reality, you were one of the people that came out and spoke about some of the realities trying to tackle drugs. Can you tell me, what is the situation?
Well, I mean, I don't know exactly what the current situation is, but I'm very aware that we have issues on the island, with the island having, particularly during the lockdown period, having been targeted because it was seen as a lucrative honeypot and a market that was much easier to exploit when other places in the UK were locked down. So, I think with the situation isn't just the issue of drugs, it's the other attendant criminality around it, and it's criminality for our young people, and it's putting them at great risk, and it's adding to the trauma of people who are already vulnerable young people.
Now, what did you take from some of the points that were raised by the group?
I think there were an awful lot of very pertinent points raised. I thought the guest speaker from across was very compelling and showed a whole range of different models that we could consider. I think the issue of it being difficult constitutionally to make any changes is a red herring, because I do think that if there was a will, then we could make a constitutional case. We are a separate jurisdiction, so there are ways and means around it, and it's an obstacle. It doesn't have to be an absolute barrier, and I think the time has come to stop hiding behind excuses and actually do something innovative and put the island on the map for a good reason.
Do you think if any of those measures were implemented here that it would actually help?
I certainly think regulatory testing of drugs to make sure that our children were not having contaminated or over-strong substances would have an immediate impact on mortality rates.
Anything else you'd like to add or say?
And just don't let our children continue dying because we've got an antiquated drugs policy and drugs laws that do not work and that are not fit for purpose. And I think it's a great tragedy that the public seems to be very much sidelined and interested in the Assisted Dying Act that affects a very small percentage of our population, largely at the end of life, and actually aren't here in numbers tonight to look at something that affects people at the beginning of their life journey and can lead to them being criminalised and having their lives decimated. I think the priorities are all wrong. I would have certainly, if I'd have been elected, I would have put a much higher priority on this than the Assisted Dying Act.
Yes, Martin Perkins, ex-MHK.
Right now, what made you come out from? What made you attend the meeting?
Drugs is a big problem for people on the Isle of Man, and it extends right across the island, and it's got exponentially more of a problem in the last few years. And I think tonight we need to have another look at what we're doing. If we carry on the same way as we're going, we'll always got the same as we always got. And I think for me, if you're a grandparent and your grandkids are growing up, you should take an interest in this, because it's very easy, when you get a certain age, it's not going to affect me and all the rest of it. But this is breaking families, and we've had a very good conversation tonight with a gentleman who lost his 2 sons, middle-aged family, all very family orientated, very good, and this can come out and actually cause such harm that we really need to get to grips with it.
You also heard from some of the public. One of the members of public spoke about the current situation in terms of drugs, and she spoke about prostitution not prostitution, but she mentioned, with drugs comes prostitution. And we had the Ofsted report that was released today. And in the report, there was a child that admitted to having sex for money just to get drugs. Now, when you hear about things like this, you generally don't think that it's happening. But when you hear about things that's happening like this, or it being identified, what goes through your mind?
Well, tonight is a big wake-up call, because we know that with drugs comes theft, prostitution, corruption of the young, and a whole raft of other things that are absolute misery. And the youngsters can get sucked into this so easily, and it ruins the rest of their lives. And it's vitally important we do something different than what we've been doing.
And seeing some of the steps that's been taken in Scotland, in Northern Ireland, in all the other areas, do you think we should implement something like that here, take on one of those steps, and if implemented, would it help?
Yeah, I think we need to look at it. And if you look at other, as you say, all the other countries, even the other crown dependencies are looking at this. And of course, the argument that the government has put forward in the past, well, until the UK does something, we can't do anything about it. But I really think you've got Scotland, you've got Jersey, Guernsey, we should all get together and have a really good look at how we can tackle this, because it is an absolute menace. And I would say it's probably one of the biggest threats to our coherent society that we have today.
Because children are the future.
Absolutely. And we must cherish them and make sure we get them the best possible start in life.
Why should we wait for the UK? Can the Isle of Man not take the reins on this one?
There are certain things that the island would like to do, but the UK feels it's one step too far. For example, the cannabis was a problem, and we had to work with the Ministry of Justice to sort that out. Now, I think if we all got together, the Channel Islands, ourselves, Scotland and Wales, and tackled the Ministry of Justice on this, they would see that the tide is turning. And it really does need some concerted effort to get this sorted out. Otherwise, it is going to be a massive, massive problem going forward.
Thank you for making it to the end of the Little Manx Radio newscast. You are obviously someone with exquisite taste. May I politely suggest you might want to subscribe to this and a wide range of Manx Radio podcasts at your favourite podcast provider, so our best bits will magically appear on your smartphone. Thank you.